When I heard about a $700 anamorphic lens, two things happened. I became very interested and very skeptical at the same time. At the face of it, a lot of boxes were being checked with manual focus, declicked aperture, anamorphic compression, all at a very cheap price. But is it any good? Let's find out. Welcome back to Friend Films. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new here, Friend Films is all about taking video from good to great, and today that means looking at a little bit of hardware. Today we're looking at the Sirui Anamorphic 50mm f1.8 lens for Sony E-mount. And we're gonna do a couple of things. We're gonna look at the tech specs of this bad boy. We're gonna look at some footage, obviously, and then at the end, we're gonna give a little bit of a review, whether or not this thing is actually worth it. First up, tech specs. This lens is a lot heftier than it looks. It's actually not that big of a lens. As you can see, it fits in my hand. It's actually really thin. I'm surprised at how narrow the diameter actually is. The build quality is fantastic. The focus throw is really nice. It's just shy of 180 degrees. I don't like the aperture ring. It's way too close to the lens mount. There's not enough room for my hand to actually reach in while it's mounted to my camera to adjust it. So I found that to be pretty frustrating. I did find it kind of weird that Sirui decided to not give this lens cinematic standards considering it's an anamorphic lens. And it would have been pretty easy for them to do this. It's simple stuff like taking the focus marks and putting them on the side of the lens rather than on the top so that somebody that's pulling focus can actually see it from the side of the camera. Or adding, focus ring gears so that when you actually mount this to a full setup, you can focus the camera with like a wireless follow focus or some sort of rig. These are standard things that you see on basically any other anamorphic lens, and most other cinema lenses have this as well. It's just a very standard, simple thing that I think Sirui easily could have done. I don't know if they didn't do it because they were trying to cut costs, or they just forgot because they're not like an established lens manufacturer. Whatever the reason, they didn't do it, and I find it a bit odd. This lens is also not a full frame lens, so I had to take my camera, which is the Sony A7R III, which we're shooting on now, and put it into a crop sensor mode. So I had to shoot in APS-C mode. This didn't really bother me as much as I thought it would. I really thought I would be bugged by not shooting in full frame. Not the case with an anamorphic lens, because you effectively get the compression of the 50mm lens. Like, this is indeed a 50mm lens. But what happens with anamorphics is that you get a wider field of view. So I effectively have the compression of a 50mm lens and the width, the field of view of a 35mm lens. So the effect was that it looked like most of my other 50mm lenses with just a slightly wider field of view. It was actually really nice. I liked it a lot. So with this lens, I did two tests. I did one at a skate park at 12 noon on a bright, sunshiny day to give the lens as much difficulty as I could with high lighting scenarios. And then the other situation that I shot in was at night in my favorite part of town, which is called the West Village, which is just covered in Christmas lights and beautiful ambient lighting all over the place. If you saw my Cine Bloom video, you know the location very well, so we went back there. I was really excited to take an anamorphic lens to that location. We'll see that footage in a little bit. A couple of things about the lens that were just off the bat, things that I noticed right away. One, way sharper than I thought it would be. I thought a lens at this price point was not gonna have this level of sharpness. I was pleasantly surprised at how sharp this lens actually is. This lens also has a fair amount of lens breathing, which is that effect of when you focus the camera, it kind of looks like it's zooming in and zooming out. A lot of people don't like that. I actually think that it's kind of an interesting factor in a lot of lenses. I sort of enjoy it. So the lens breathing was manageable for me. Some people might not like that though. The lens flares in this lens were pretty cool, but nowhere near as present as I thought they would be when I was actually using the lens. All of the other footage that I saw online, there was a lot of this blue flare that this lens has become known for. I didn't see nearly as much of that as I thought I would. And when we get to the nighttime test, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Right, okay, enough talk about the lens. Let's take a look at some footage that we shot with it. Now, first of all, I want you to know that when I was at the skate park and when I was outside, I wore a mask. There are a lot of people in these videos that are not wearing masks, and I'm not cool with that, but I wore my mask when I was out there shooting them. I promise you. There's even footage of me wearing my mask, so please, those are the facts. Okay, let's take a look at some footage. The lens handles movement in a really interesting way. I don't know if it's because of the D-squeeze and I can't really see the rolling shutter as much because of that, but the movement of the camera is just more pleasant to look at with this lens than it would be with like a normal 50mm lens. It's almost like the image has like a built-in indie look to it. And I know that doesn't really sound like very scientific or anything, but it just kind of feels like an indie lens. It's also a very clean image. There are no real glaring characteristics of the lens. It's sharp, but not too sharp. It doesn't really flare too much, at least not in this setting. Operationally, it was really no different from any other 50mm lens that I've used. It really did feel like a normal 50mm lens, which is a good thing, because for shooters that haven't used anamorphics before, the best thing for something new is to feel like something old so that you know how to use it and you're confident when you do. First, I was surprised at how rarely I saw the iconic blue flares that this lens is known for. I really thought that the first setting that I had would have been Flare City, but that was not the case. I was finally able to get some flares by pointing the lens directly into a light source, and the light source had to be very bright. I basically only got the flaring to happen off of the headlights of cars. Streetlights and all the other lighting sources that I shot didn't really give any flaring, which surprised me. It makes the lens a lot more subtle than expected. Even in low light, I could see a lot of breathing. Like I said, I actually enjoy this feature, but it's not for everyone. That iconic oval bokeh that you get from an anamorphic lens really only became apparent when the light sources were really far away from the lens. There's just not enough compression for the effect to be super visible with the Sirui anamorphic lenses. I did notice a little bit of vignetting on the ice rink, but I didn't really notice it anytime prior to that. I think shooting on a pure white backdrop made the vignette more visible. Overall, the vignetting is very minimal. Okay, all right, let's wrap this thing up. If you want an anamorphic lens, then get the Sirui anamorphic lenses. They've got three of them. They've got the 50, the 35, and the 24. It is a full-on, all the way anamorphic lens that you can shoot anamorphic footage with. But here's why I'm not gonna get it. And it's not because I don't like anamorphic lenses. I love anamorphic lenses. I think they're great. The Sirui anamorphic lenses aren't anamorphic enough. Do you know what I mean? Let me explain. So if you go to a restaurant and you order dinner that's supposed to be spicy, the chef can put as much spice or as little spice as they want in the dish, and it will still be a spicy meal. But there has to be a certain amount of it for you to really recognize the spice. And that's exactly how I feel about anamorphic lenses. There has to be a certain amount of anamorphic characteristics to a lens for me to be able to appreciate it. So for me, the Sirui anamorphic lenses just don't have enough anamorphic spice. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you love the video, go ahead and subscribe. I put out one of these every single week, and I will see you next time. Peace.